In part one, we talked about how the flat 7 is oftentimes misconstrued as a 4 chord. But this common misconception of the flat 7 being a 4 chord is not what makes it an imposter chord. If only it were that simple. What really classifies our flat 7 as an imposter chord is the fact that this flat 7 appears on our map as a dominant chord, but it's really from the subdominant region. Much like the 3 minor chord, the flat 7 has an ambiguity to it that isn't really fully defined until you zoom out and see the context in which it's being used. This is a really intriguing and peculiar chord that has all sorts of uses and implications. So the flat 7 is an imposter chord. It poses as a dominant, but it is actually a subdominant. Not only that, it's a modal interchange chord that could not only be borrowed from the minor mode, but from other parallel modes as well. Even more, it's as effective when used to precede a subdominant as it is to follow a subdominant. If you're new to MDEX Music, we create music books and apps, piano arrangements, and we discuss improvisation, songwriting, and sometimes we take music theory to strange and uncharted places. So subscribe and hit the bell, and join us for exclusive access to our ever-expanding library of music resources. Remember, chords in the dominant region should contain the leading tone of the key, T, or C sharp in the key of D. But the flat 7 contains, well, the flat 7. Even further, it contains the 4 and the 6, or the flat 6, which are all characteristic notes of the subdominant region. So if we're in the key of D, C sharp is our leading tone and absolutely wants to resolve up. And that's why most chords, or all chords in the dominant region, have that C sharp in it. Like if we just did an authentic cadence, you would definitely hear that half-step resolution up. Look at the subdominant notes of the scale. Notes like G, that's why the G chord is subdominant in the key of D. It's also present in the C chord. No leading tone anymore, no C sharp, but the subtonic, a C natural, that is also drawn towards the D. So basically making a case here for why this C chord, when we're in the key of D, this flat 7, even without context, has all the earmarks of a subdominant chord, and why it's drawn back to the D in like this plagal-like sound. How about we take a look at a couple examples using the flat 7 as a subdominant chord and a couple examples using it as a dominant chord. So in songs like Christmas Time Is Here, when there's very little context and there's just the one chord and the flat 7 going back and forth to and from one another, it has a real plagal quality to it. More context is really needed to sort of make it feel more dominant than that. Because remember what we said, it has all the earmarks and naturally has subdominant tendencies to it. So anytime you see just kind of like one flat 7, one ping-ponging back and forth, you're definitely looking at that flat 7 in its most like natural state as a subdominant chord. The chord has such strong subdominant tendencies that you can take a typically undisputably subdominant chord like a 2 minor 7 flat 5 or even a 4 minor and swap it out with a flat 7 and get the same desired effect. Let's use All By Myself to illustrate that point. So more often than not, when you hear recordings of the song, you hear that 1 to the 2 minor 7 flat 5 movement. Tonic, subdominant, tonic. You might also hear in other arrangements that 2 minor 7 flat 5 be a 4 minor chord. So you have like a G, C minor effect going on there. Both subdominant chords. But what happens if we swap out either of those with a flat 7? It still has that same tonic, subdominant, tonic sound. the subdominantness of our flat 7 chord is quite evident in either of these examples. But how can we use it in a dominant sort of way? So this flat 7 is used in a dominant sort of way a lot of times in what are called backdoor progressions or backdoor 2/5s. And it's these backdoor progressions and the context that they present that really highlight our imposter chord's dual purpose, like in Misty. So in Misty, we have this really typical use of the flat 7 in a backdoor 2/5, where you have a 4 minor to a flat 7, which in and of itself is a 2/5. It just kind of resolves home in a backdoor fashion in an unexpected way. It doesn't go to its expected target, it goes to the target of the key that we're in. So in Misty, it's used like this. What's cool about these chords, or at least the A flat minor, the 4 minor, and our flat 7, the D flat 7 here, is like in out of context, you expect them to resolve to a G flat, because that would be like a 2-5-1. Why it's called a backdoor progression is because it's sort of a alternative route to our tonic chord of E flat. We actually have a whole video on this in Misty, using Misty as a tool to talk about tonal harmony and the brackets analysis, brackets arrows analysis. So check that out if you want to learn more. We see the same sort of dominant use of this flat 7 in the intro and outro of that Beatles song with a little help from my friend. So you have this C, D, flat 6, flat 7, 1. Again, now there's some extra context here which makes the flat 7, D, in this case, more viable, more believable as a dominant chord. Again, before, like we were talking about with Christmas Time Is Here, if all I did was bounce back and forth between E and D, it has a more sort of plagal-like sound. But the second we put it in a larger context of flat 6, flat 7, 1, has a more dominant sort of aspect to it now. In minor keys, it's used to create the clockwise movement to arrive at the flat 3 chord, the relative major, like in I Will Survive. So the flat 7 could replace the 4, it could follow the 4, it could be a triad, a dominant sharp 11, and even a major 7 chord, depending on where we're borrowing it from. And as I've shown you in previous examples, it works really well when it follows a subdominant and resolves to the tonic, acting as a dominant chord. But in reality, this chord does not really belong to the dominant region. It's an imposter chord. Thanks again for watching. All our members will have access to supplemental material on today's topic. If you're not a member and would like to become one, just click on that join button or the provided link down below. Thanks again for watching. We'll catch you next time.